Dad, please give him a warm welcome. Very nice to see you.
Nothing like being introduced by family. Wow. I was humbled. Back away from this one here. I'm overwhelmed. All of you got up so early in the morning. I had to get up because I was speaking. You didn't have to, so thank you. That means a tremendous amount. I want to share with you this morning a story. I look at it as a three-part story. PJ shared a little bit about Pop. I'll share a little bit of the insight to what you may not have heard. A little bit about my youth growing up. Maybe if I move this down a little bit. A little bit about my youth growing up. And then the change that occurred in my life 11 years ago this month. As PJ said, Dad has been very, very blessed. The only one to ever own 3 sports teams at the same time. And to created or been a part of 6 companies that have been listed on the stock exchange. But what you may not have known, very few people know, is that he was poor when he married my mother. In fact, my mother says that Dad was so poor that he sold his old pickup truck to buy her engagement ring. That wedding and marriage led to him borrowing some money from a local bank, borrowing some money from my grandfather, and buying an old garbage truck from an African-American man before I was born. Mom said that she would go with Dad at nighttime. They'd park that garbage truck in a gravel lot, but she'd go with him to help him make sure that it would run. She said, I basically held the flashlight for your dad when he'd tinker with the truck. And she'd tell me stories of palmetto bugs, you know, it's what us Southerners call big roaches. And she said that those palmetto bugs, honey, they were as big as sparrows. They'd fly up in my face. And your dad would yell at me, hold the light still, Joyce, and she'd be flailing. Told me stories of land crabs that would hear the commotion and see the light and would start to walk toward her. And she could hear their legs in the gravel. And she said they were as big as dinner plates. I mean, she'd shiver and she'd say, it still gives me the willies thinking about it. Well, from that one truck, Dad created a company called Southern Sanitation. And he's quite the marketing genius, if I don't mind saying. On the sides of his trucks, he used them as giant billboards. He had sayings on there like, we cater weddings. Mom said, it said we cater Polish weddings. And she convinced him way before things were politically correct that wasn't the right thing to put on there. We cater weddings. Pete, you remember that. It had on there, caution, this truck has bad breath. And only in South Florida, free snow removal. As the story goes, to merge that company with my Uncle Dean. He's not really my uncle, but being Dutch, all my uncles are friends and family members are uncles and cousins, whether we're related or not, are cousins. So it's just been Uncle Dean Von Truck. And they went on to create Waste Management. And it was incredible. But during that time when Dad was busy starting and creating Southern Sanitation and getting ready to merge with Uncle Dean, my mother decided that they weren't spending enough time together. They were both wonderful people, but not really cut out for each other, she decided. So when I was 5, my brother Scott was 3, she went to the Dutch Reformed Church down in Pompano, a little tiny church down there, a transplant from here, and talked to the pastor. And the pastor said, hey, listen, Joyce, that's not acceptable. And in fact, if you go through with this divorce, you can no longer be a member of the church. They kind of kicked her out of the church. And, it was, I tell people that don't know the Dutch Reformed Church, I say you kind of have the Baptist, and then you have the Dutch Reformed Church, now the Reformed Church of America, even to the right of them. And, it was a sad thing, because when Mom needed her faith in the church the most, the pastor kind of kicked her out. And so for anybody that's been injured by a clergy person, I'd like to apologize, because while often they're good intentions, sometimes, as people do, as humans, we say or do things that injure other people in the name of God. And we know that our God is much more loving than that. Well, after being booted from the church, Mom decided that there wasn't much left for her in Florida. So she packed my brother Scott and I up, and we moved back to Chicago. And I lived 8 years in Chicago. I lived 7 of those years at 63rd and the tracks, just up from Midway Airport, where I fell in love with White Castle. And I'm going to make PJ stop and get me a few to go home tonight before I go home. As time went on, I didn't spend much time in church. So again, like I said, Mom was kind of in at the church, but she loved Jesus very much, and she read the Bible to us and pray with us. I made it to enough church with my grandfather and my grandmother, to enough Sunday school to hear that there was a God, that he had a wonderful son named Jesus that came to this earth and died a horrible death on our behalf so that we could go to heaven. I learned about heaven, and for sure in the Reformed Church of America, I learned about the alternative. And at an early age, I don't know, I want that heaven thing, because the other place sounds really scary. And but as time went on, I wanted to be more like my pop. I watched his success. I watched the power that he was garnering and the way that people looked up to him and the way that he impacted people. And then just like all boys, I suppose, I wanted to be like my dad. And as I grew and watched him become more and more successful, I said, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be wealthy like he is so that I can impact people's lives and people will say great things about him. And I did. I went on to college and I worked hard. I worked for Waste Management when I was 12. I got my first paycheck and I went to Saudi Arabia with Waste Management, and I knew that one day I would work for Waste Management. That is until my third year of college. The dorm phone rings, no cell phones back then, so you had to go out in the hallway. Dad says, hey, are you going to be around tomorrow? Can I come and see you? Yeah, absolutely, Pop, that'd be great. Didn't see him much. He was still working really hard with Waste Management then. I hung up the phone and my mind started wondering, why is Pop coming down? Grades aren't out yet. It can't be that. It can't be that. Well, it is what it is. And I remember sitting on a bench at school with Dad and him telling me that he was going to retire from Waste Management. And I think my jaw kind of dropped because he said, well, what's the matter? I said, well, Pop, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I mean, I've had my midlife crisis, which my bride is having, 21 years married, that I had it in college and not now. But I had my midlife crisis in third year of my college. And he said, well, you know, Junior, you could still go to work for Waste. I'm sure they'd still have you. And I said, well, Pop, but it just wouldn't be the same if you're not there. And he looked at me, and you know how you have that relationship with your dad where you can kind of read their mind. And I envisioned him thinking, well, son, you know, I was at the top, and you certainly weren't going to be anywhere near the top when you came in. It's not like we were going to work together every day anyway. And he would have been right. But that was just something that I had always dreamed about. So that kind of came crashing down. I had my midlife crisis and didn't know what I was going to do. Well, fortunately, things worked out. As PJ said, I graduated from college, and about that time that I graduated, I started working for my grandfather in a small business, and Dad got involved with Blockbuster Video, and there was a fantastic opportunity to work with him there. It was both a blessing and a curse. And I say a curse now in hindsight because, you know, Pop loaned all the kids some money, and we all bought Blockbuster Video stock. And all of a sudden, as he did so well and the company grew, I think the stock went up over 3,000%. All of a sudden, I had a ton of money. Money that I didn't earn, money that I didn't deserve, and money that I certainly didn't know what to do with, or at least the right things with. That was a wonderful time. That was a heady time, an incredible time. I married my childhood bride that I met when I was 15. I was blessed with 2 children, Savannah and Trey, and it was, you know, I was on top of the world. We were going to sports games, sporting events and whatnot. It was fantastic. And I remember my mother coming to me so clearly and saying, Junior, I'm worried about you. So what are you worried about, Mom? Well, I'm worried how you're going to ground your children. You know, this is wonderful, all these things that we're getting to do, and I love getting to travel and all, and I love, you know, when you put things in my little stocking, you know, we were young, we were fairly poor. You know, the little house that I grew up in is still there on 6030, so now it has a second story. It was 5 rooms, and she had a little tiny stocking, and the joke was she would hang it on a tree, and she'd say, honey, this is for hundreds or for jewelry? And, you know, that was the big joke, because we didn't have money for either at that time. And she said, I love the little things you put in my stocking now and all. She said, but I'm worried, because the life you're leading and the things that you do and the way that you spend money, it's not really how the rest of the world is. And I said, well, what do you suggest? She said, well, I think you need to go to church. You need to find a good church and get the kids in church and in Sunday school, and that will help to ground them. And I would make excuses. I said, well, you know, Mom, I'm working a lot of hours. I'm working on sometimes on Sunday. I'm traveling a lot, and you know, and Sunday is really my only day off. And what I didn't have the heart to say, or wasn't mad enough to tell my mom is, you know, Mom, on Sunday morning I'm really hungover, and the last place that I want to be is at church. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. But she knew, mothers always do. See, but God had a plan. He had a plan. He kept putting people in my life. And one day I got a phone call from a friend that said, hey, Junior, it's Gary. I said, hey, man, what's going on? He says, I've got an opportunity. He said, do you have any interest in flying up to South Carolina and spending 3 days on a nuclear fast attack submarine and cruising down the Fort Lauderdale? I said, oh my God, aren't I? Of course. He says, when are we going? He said, we're going tomorrow. I said, it's short notice, but not a problem. I'll talk to Pop and see if we can borrow the plane. And as he always does, he's generous. He said, absolutely. And so myself and 4 other guys flew up, and we went to the naval station there, and that's where I met Captain Brad Fleetwood McDonald, an incredible naval officer, big and tall and skinny and strapping. And we went out, he took us on his ship, and we had an incredible time. Sorry, my Starbucks coffee may be dry. He let us have free run of the ship. We got to drive the ship, and sat in the sonar, listening for enemy freighters and whatnot that might come and attack our coast. Great things. And cooked in the galley. I think that I was on the ship 3 days. I think I slept about 12 hours the whole time, and we were kind of hot-rocking with the guys because it was tight on there. But I had a ball. I cooked pizza for the guys at midnight, and we even set a record on the submarine for how many men you could put in a torpedo tube. 5 guys would fit in a torpedo tube. And you know me, as PJ says, lead the trip. Like, I'll go first. And as I'm backing into the torpedo tube and my feet are against the breech face, 4 other fellows' butts are back in. I think this wasn't a good idea to be first. And then the guys close the door and spin the handle on there. I'm thinking, great, they're going to hit the button, and there we go, out of the air. And instead they started banging on there. And you know, I'm in there and kind of big, and I was bent like this, my shoulders bent over, and I'm like, you need to open the door now, or there's going to be a major panic attack. Well, they opened the door, and we all got out of there, and it was an incredible time. Well, Captain Brad and I, we became great friends. I found out that he loved to fish, and that's one of my passions, fishing and diving, being in the water. And so I said, hey, Cap, you took me on your boat that goes underwater. Come with me and let's go fishing. And he did. He'd come, and it was a wonderful time when he'd come in. He always had his Bible open. I'd find him in the morning when we get up reading his Bible. And I began to think about it as a young leader, what he could teach me. I thought anybody that could take 102, 106 guys and go on a 6-month deployment and spend a lot of that time underwater has to be a phenomenal leader to not lose control of these young people. And I'd ask him questions about leadership, about conflict resolution and whatnot. And every time I did, he'd open up his Bible and he'd read me a different verse or so or chapter out of the Bible. And then he'd explain to me how he applies that to his leadership skills as a captain of a submarine. And as time went on, I became more and more selective of who I'd take with me, because I began to realize that Captain Brad was someone that I wanted to be very badly. And I just watched him, and I've been blessed to meet a lot of guys, you know, presidents and other people, and sports figures, and great business people and whatnot. But what I saw in Captain Brad was amazing. He didn't drink like I did. He didn't swear like I did, even though he was a sailor. And he had a view of the world that was unlike any that I'd ever seen before. It was incredible, and just this peace about him. Nothing really got him worked, which I guess is what you want when you got a guy running a nuclear submarine, but nonetheless. And one day, we were together. Fishing was extremely slow. It wasn't a great day like when PJ and I were together. And I asked him, I said, hey, Cap, I want to be more like you. How do I be more like you? And he kind of looked at me and you know, reading his face like, geez, Junior, we've been hanging out for 3 years. I was wondering when you were going to ask. And he told me, he said, Junior, he said, you know, you need to have a relationship with God, a personal relationship with God. He said, have you ever heard that you were created in God's image? I said, yeah, but I never quite understood that. He said, well, think of it this way. He said, God left a hole in your heart when he created you. I said, a hole in my heart? He said, not a physical hole, but a hole that could only be filled by him. He said, think of that hole like a black hole of space. He said, you've heard of those before. I said, yeah, I've seen the things on TV, the illustrations of what they think it looks like, where it sucks planets in, it has this incredible gravity pull and whatnot, and everything disappears into the thing. He said, exactly.